10th class physical science lesson chemical bond topic covalent bond. Covalent bond means sharing electrons by two elements is called covalent bond. So here we can see the two fluorine atoms are there. So valency electrons is 1. So these two valency electrons shared by two fluorine electrons. So here we can see single bond is formed between the two fluorine atoms. So these two 1 electron comes together between the two fluorine atoms. So these two electrons shared by two fluorine atoms and form the single bond between the fluorine atoms. So here two fluorine atoms form a single stable molecule by sharing both fluorine atoms and getting octet positions. So 7 electrons, valence electrons in one fluorine atom, and second fluorine contains as a 7 electrons. So one valence electrons shared by two fluorine atoms. So these two electrons shared by two fluorine atoms and form a single bond for getting octet position. Next one, formation of oxygen molecule. So oxygen atomic number 8, electron configuration 2, 6. So valency electrons of the oxygen is 2. So 2 oxygen atoms are there. So one oxygen atom has a 2 valence electrons and another oxygen has a 2 valence electrons. So these 2 electrons and these 2 electrons comes together between 2 oxygen atoms and form double bond between the 2 oxygen atoms. So here we can see the diagram. Valence electrons can be seen. 2 valence electrons in one oxygen, another 2 valence electrons in another oxygens. So these 2 electrons, these 2 valence electrons comes together between the 2 oxygen atoms and forming a double bond by sharing 4 valence electrons between oxygens. So oxygen exists 2 covalent bonds between 2 oxygen atoms in O2 molecules by sharing 2 pair electrons. 2 pair electrons means 4 electrons. So double bond is formed between 2 oxygen atoms by getting octet positions. Next one, nitrogen. Nitrogen molecule. So how many nitrogen atoms are there? 2 atoms are there. N2 means 2 atoms of nitrogen in one molecule. So in how many valence electrons are there in one nitrogen means 3 valence electrons are there, and another nitrogen atom 3 valence electrons are there. So these 3 electrons and another 3 electrons comes between 2 nitrogen atoms. So these 6 valence electrons form the triple bond between the nitrogen atoms. So sharing the 6 electrons between the nitrogen atoms and form a triple bond. So when valency electrons in both nitrogen atoms comes together between two nitrogen atoms sharing 6 electrons by two nitrogen atoms and form a triple bond for getting stability. Next one, methane. So methane means carbon and 4 hydrogen is there. So CH4. The formula of methane is CH4. C is a carbon element, H is a hydrogen element. So one molecule methane has a 1 carbon and 4 hydrogens are there. So how many valency electrons are there in carbon? 4 valency electrons are there. And 4 hydrogen atoms are there, so they has a 1 valency electrons. So these 4 valency electrons shared by carbon and 4 hydrogen atoms. So carbon and hydrogen shared 8 electrons for getting octet positions. Carbon has a valence electrons 4 and 4 hydrogen atoms are there and they have a 1 valence electrons. So when the 8 electrons comes between the carbon and hydrogens and form a 4 covalent bonds between the carbon and hydrogen. So 1 carbon and 4 hydrogen atoms shared 8 electrons for getting octet position and forming compound methane. So around carbon, so the 4 hydrogens are there. So carbon has a 4 valence electrons and 4 hydrogen atoms has a 4 valence electrons. So these 8 electrons shared by carbon and hydrogens for getting octet positions. Next one, ammonia. So ammonia formula NH3. So N means nitrogen, H means hydrogens. So 1 nitrogen is there and 1 nitrogen and 3 hydrogen is there. So nitrogen has a valence electrons 3, 1, 2, 3 and 3 hydrogen atoms are there. So each hydrogen has a 1 valence electron. So around nitrogen 3 hydrogen atoms are there and the 3 plus 3, 6 electrons shared by nitrogen and hydrogens. Nitrogen atom is 1 and valency electrons 3 and hydrogen atoms are 3 and each hydrogen has a 1 valency electron. So around nitrogen atom 3 hydrogen atoms are there and nitrogen valence electron 3 and hydrogen valence electron 3 comes between nitrogen and hydrogen and 6 electrons shared by nitrogen and 3 hydrogen atoms forming compound ammonia. So 3NH, single covalent bond. Single covalent bond is formed between the nitrogen and hydrogen for getting the octet position. Next one, water. Water formula H2O. H means hydrogen, O means oxygen. Here oxygen valence of electrons 2 and 1 oxygen atom is there, valence electrons 2 is there. Hydrogen atoms are 2 seen here and each hydrogen has a 1 valence electrons. So around the oxygen 2 hydrogen atoms are there and oxygen valence electrons 2 and hydrogen atoms electrons 2 comes between the oxygen and hydrogen and share these 4 electrons by oxygen and hydrogens. So oxygen valence electrons and hydrogen valence electrons formed the single covalent bond between the oxygen and hydrogen. So 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom shared 4 electrons to attain octet position for forming compound water H2O molecule. So H2O is a water molecule. So oxygen has a how many valency electrons? 2 valency electrons. And hydrogen. So how many atoms are there? Two atoms. Hydrogen is there and valency electrons. One hydrogen has a 1 valency electron and another hydrogen atom has a 1 valency electrons. So all of them electrons comes between oxygen and hydrogen and forming a OH single covalent bond. So these 4 electrons shared by the oxygen and hydrogens. So all these about the covalent bond. ఉదయం వేళ ప్రేయర్కేమో రమ్మంటావు ఉదయం వేళ ప్రేయర్కేమో రమ్మంటారు పగటి పూటే లంచ్ చేసి జల్దీ జల్దీ కమ్మంటారు ఉదయం కాదు పగలు కాదు ఈవినింగ్ ఏమో వేటల వద్దు అంటావా మేడం అంటావా అంటావా మేడం అంటావా మేడం ఉదయం వేళ ప్రేయర్కేమో రమ్మంటారు పగటి పూటే లంచ్ చేసి జల్దీ జల్దీ కమ్మంటారు ఉదయం కాదు పగలు కాదు ఈవినింగ్ ఏమో వేటల వద్దు అంటావా మేడం అంటావా మేడం ఉదయం వేళ ప్రేయర్కేమో రమ్మంటారు పగటి పూటే లంచ్ చేసి జల్దీ జల్దీ కమ్మంటారు ఉదయం కాదు పగలు కాదు ఈవినింగ్ ఏమో వేటన వద్దు అంటావా